What's up, guys? Happy New Year. Some people get upset when I point out that very popular theories on YouTube are wrong. What I'm doing is showing the results of my personal research and explaining why I think the way I think. And I know that other people out there are looking for the actual unbiased truth, not someone promoting a narrative. That being said, did you guys know that this right here is an electrical power station? And that this is how people are healing themselves? No? More on that later. The powers that be love their little euphemisms, and they now actually have a name for this madness that we're living through. They're calling it the post-truth era. And Webster's dictionary now defines this as relating to or denoting circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief. I see this all the time when people are talking about history. They ignore objective facts for things that they feel like this should be the right answer. But if you were to hop in a car right now and drive to New Orleans, would you want the driver to know where to make a right turn, or would you want them to feel like this is the right time to make a right turn? Well, I use the same principle when I'm researching history, and I just assume that the person that made the map might have made a mistake. I check and double check everything, and sometimes drive down the wrong road for a long time before I realize I'm going in the wrong direction and have to double back. 10 years ago, all alternative research was geared towards aliens must have built all of the ancient megalithic structures around here. Fast forward to now, and the Tatarians must have built not only all of the ancient megaliths, but every single building of any building style in any part of the world. Christian cathedral, Tatarian. Muslim mosque, Tatarian. Hindu temple, Tatarian. Mesoamerican pyramids, Tatarian. The same goes for resets. The 1666 Great Fire of London, the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, the Civil War, the 1945 bombing of Hiroshima, all a reset. And if we continue this method of research in 10 years from now, this is going to be the quote-unquote truth. And the powers that be love this. That's why they promote the Tataria theory so much. It's because they are playing straight out of the 1984 handbook, and they don't want any objective facts out there. They want everyone to think that everything is sus. And if we keep dropping rando letters off of all of the words, then we're going to regress right back to grunting within 100 years. But mass media has become the ministry of truth. And if you read the book, the antagonist O'Brien worked in the ministry of truth, and his job was to correct, quote unquote, entries into the official record. So just understand that the objective here is to get rid of objective truth and make everything this quasi gray area. I get asked all the time, how can you agree with anything out of the official narrative? Okay, first off, I don't just flat out agree with the official narrative. I list the actual events that I disagree with, like the founding of America and the Middle Ages. The timeline doesn't add up. And the parts that I do agree with is because I've spent years trying to prove it wrong, and I can't. If you can, show me your evidence. But in this video, I'm going to use objective facts that cannot be denied to show why I think what I think, instead of just believing the official narrative or the YouTube narrative. The YouTube narrative being that we had this utopian Tatarian society of advanced machinery, assumedly, that built all of the stone structures, no matter where they are located around the world. So what I am showing you here on the screen are just a few of the thousands of defensive walls that are meant to keep other people out. This tells me definitively that the people that built these didn't trust their neighbors that much, and therefore it was not some utopian society. The hardline fact is that people put a lot of effort into keeping themselves safe. Now I'm going to show you guys 3 common words that we use today that tell me exactly the kind of world that our ancestors lived in. And this was such common knowledge that we use these words every day. The first one is sincere. I mean, we sign all of our letters sincerely, free from pretense or deceit, proceeding from genuine feelings. I want to point out the fact that we don't have any Tatarian words, we don't have any Tatarian folk tales or nursery rhymes or anything. And most of our words come from the Latin root words. So sign or sin, without, and cera, wax. So sincere means without wax. What could that possibly mean? Well, let's look at this literal masterpiece. Not everybody out there can make this. This is the best of the best. That's why these are called masterpieces. I've seen several videos at this point that use this as evidence of advanced machinery to make all of this, but not a one of them has ever shown the whole sculpture, and I'm going to tell you why here in a minute. Back in the day when artists were trained from birth to make beautiful works of art like this, people made mistakes. And when you've got 10,000 hours invested into your sculpture and you accidentally create a little divot, well, they would grind up marble dust, mix it in with wax, and they would fill the hole with it. And this was such a common thing that it created the whole saying of sincera, sincerely. That means I'm coming to you without trying to cover up my faults. I'm not trying to deceive you in any way. I'm being sincere. I'm being without wax. Now, I can build you just about any structure that you can dream up, but I can't carve or paint anything. My nephew can. Some people have that gift, and in the old world, just like this kid right here, they recognized that gift early, and so they sent them to school to learn with other great sculptors, and that's why you have the famous artists that we have from our history. They didn't spend 8 hours a day for 12 years of their life regurgitating facts and being completely indoctrinated into this system. They were trained from a young age so they could go on to create masterpieces like this. You don't start out at this level. It takes years and years of hard work, and then only a handful of people are capable of doing things like this. And this is why I've not seen anyone else use the whole sculpture on their videos. It's because the cherubim is sitting on a ball earth. Now, do you think that idea came from the Tatarians, or did it come from the Italian Renaissance and the French free bricklayers? It also has a footnote down at the bottom written in Latin, and I'm not going to take the time to try to translate it, but over to the right, you see that they listed all of the sponsors. This is the old world equivalent of a stock car. It's the sponsors' names plastered all over the side of the statue. And just another example that these were actually carved by hand is this statue outside of a cathedral, showing that they carved it by hand. I really doubt that they 3D printed this statue to throw everybody off. And when you zoom in closer, you see the same masterly attention to detail. For me, especially in the clothing here, it literally looks like I'm looking at a leather jacket with all of those folds. And look how subtle the end of the sleeve blends into the hand. I mean, this is master level work. This level of master craftsmanship and the big magnificent structures that they have built is all ignored by today's mainstream education, because their goal is to teach you that you are the height of civilization. It's never been better than this, when in fact we have digressed substantially. Which is more valuable, today's liberal arts degree or yesterday's literal art degree? All depending on your aptitude. I would have been a master builder, flat out. The next word is gaudy, extravagantly bright or showy, typically as to be tasteless. Now, we all use this word to describe something that's just over the top, too much. You should have just chilled out a little, man. Like these gaudy costumes or a gaudy building. Everyone in construction and design knows that there's a very fine line between just right and way too much. Let's look at the Sagrada Familia. This is a cathedral that was started in 1882, and I'm not even sure if it's completely finished now. They've been working on it, but just like every other architect, this one took bits and pieces of design from all of the other cathedrals, combined them all together, and kind of made this big gaudy monstrosity in Barcelona. The architect who designed this is named Antoni Gaudy. And unfortunately for him, now his name is used to describe a building that is just over the top, too much extravagance. Since this cathedral was built after the invention of the camera, then of course we have a lot of photographs of every stage of its construction. In an upcoming video, I will show you the photographs of quite a few different cathedrals at their completion stages, where everybody just says, well, they just took off the Antiquitech antennas. But that's not the case. I've got the structural details of what they're doing in the remodel. This is one of only a handful of cathedrals to be financed by private individuals. Almost all of the major cathedrals belong to the Catholic Empire because you had to have deep pockets to pay the talented craftsmen that are capable of doing this. Construction is now and always has been a very profitable business. One of the ways the Catholic Empire financed these churches was by selling indulgences, and that not only bought you your forgiveness for your sins, but also the sins of your deceased loved ones. And it became common practice to sell burial plots underneath the floor of most of the major cathedrals. So the natural progression of that was to just go ahead and build the crypts underneath it to be able to store more remains. There are legitimate photos out there of buildings that have been through a catastrophe or at least a flood to where they got buried in mud. But this is why I say that you're never going to learn anything from random photographs, because here, what you're looking at is intentionally built vaults underneath the ground. And the bigger the building, the deeper the foundations go. You have to get down to very well compacted soil to hold this weight up, if not bedrock. And my third and final word is bastion. This is used in our common vocabulary all the time. The last bastion of hope, the last bastion of freedom. What are you saying when you say that? Well, this is a bastion. This one is kind of rounded, and then some of them are kind of pointy like this one. And you can see that this one looks like it's taken a cannonball in the side right here. And a bastion is a defensive fortification. So if you say you're down to your last bastion, then you fell back to your final position. You have no other ground to defend. You are at your last bastion. And prior to the invention of firearms and cannons, these weren't necessarily needed. But once those became a factor in warfare, then they purposely built fortifications so that they had clean lines of fire, and also so that you wouldn't take direct fire from the enemy. And after your enemy tried and failed to subdue this bastion fort, then they went home and they built their own because they realized how ingenious this design was. This gave rise to bastion forts being constructed in key defensive areas all around the world. And these are better known on the internet as Starforts. Beginning of the video, when I told you that this retaining wall was an electrical power plant or a healing center, did you believe me? I personally would not believe that, but when you're looking at a bastion fort, you're looking at a stone wall that is retaining dirt behind it, and I've never seen anyone provide any photographic evidence showing that there is anything more to it. And you can look at the old ones here, and you can see that they are just rocks and dirt. Then let's look at the locations of these. You can see that they are all positioned along modern day, these aren't ancient country borders. Well, France kind of is, but these are modern day country borders where they are all located. So it actually makes strategic sense for defense. Just like all of the obvious defensive walls that I showed at the beginning of the video. This doesn't tell me anything about a utopian society. It tells me that they were defense minded towards their neighbors. Canada, you see the same thing. They're all right there at the US border. You've got one up in the Hudson Bay that is a river inlet to the interior of the country. United States, same thing, all up and down the East Coast and up the Mississippi River through the center of the country, which the rivers used to be the superhighways. And then there's one out in New Mexico that is along the old Santa Fe Trail, an ancient roadway. Okay, but what about the cymatic patterns? Well, let's look at those. There's one word that describes every single cymatic pattern out there that you're going to be able to find. That word is symmetrical. You have the 0 point energy in the center, and then it radiates out symmetrically from that center. This is an objective fact. You will find this every single time. But when you look at Starforts, these are some of the more symmetrical ones that I've found. But by and large, they are nowhere near symmetrical. Every one of these were purpose built for the landscape around them. This one, for example, you have 3 spaced out pretty far apart, facing out to the sea, because it would be a rather foolish move to bring your ship within cannon range of this fort. And then you have 3 kind of close together so that people can't flank you and come around and take you by land. But every one of these are purpose built for the site that they are at. And hey, they may look vaguely similar to cymatic patterns, but the Cardiff Giant looks vaguely similar to a petrified giant. That doesn't make it the truth, but it did hoax a lot of people, just like people today are telling everybody what they want to hear, what they feel like should be right, because there's a lot of money to be made off of telling people what they want to hear. So if you're willing to ignore the objective facts and base your whole theory of the world off of evidence that leaves out all of the obvious things that I have brought to your attention, then that's fine. I was one of the first 5 channels that was making videos on mud flood, and I did not sell out to the Tartaria idea. I could have jumped on the Tartaria bandwagon just like everybody else was, and I could have cashed in and made a lot of money. You know, these views that some of these channels are getting is thousands of dollars a week. But I can't sit there with a straight face and tell somebody some narrative that just has so many holes in it that it don't float. I'm making these videos for people that actually want the truth and not just what everybody else is repeating. And to you guys, thank you very much for sticking around. I'll see you on the next one. Peace out.